And we're live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I see Cyrus Wright, Chubby Funster, Elf Hunter in the chat already. Thank you so much. All, of course, commenting on the name. I'm here today with. Is it Lordmatteus, Lordmatteus? How?
When I was originally called Lordmatteus back in the 90s, it
Okay.
was Matteus. Long story, but then Venger Satanist started calling me Mattias, and I just kind of left it up to the internet to pronounce it however they feel like it.
Gotcha. It's kind of like the R.A. Salvatore approach. Why would I tell you how to pronounce my name when the argument is going to generate so much buzz? So I guess I'm here with both Lordmatteus and Lordmatteus. And why don't you go ahead and tell people about you, what your deal is, where they can find you.
Sure. So yeah, I have a YouTube channel. It's basically Lordmatteus on YouTube. I'm also on Rumble Gaming with Lordmatteus. I started doing this because I really love this hobby. I can go into details of that, but like it really means a lot, like what this hobby's done for me as a person. Not in a like psychological sense, but like it's part of who I am, and I wanted to contribute in some way. And I like independent games, and that's what my channel started out as. But then I started doing some writing of my own, and I also have a blog, WordPress, Lordmatteus, pretty easy, right? Where I just kind of like provide some of my ideas, and things that I've been thinking about. So I'm on Twitter, Lordmatteus 2312. I like to talk about games, review games, and play them, most importantly, because I think at the end of the day, that's what this hobby really is about. So
I certainly agree.
Sorry, Gary will kill me if I don't say this because I'm always forgetting to. I started a live stream Friday nights, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard, 10 Central, called The Second Watch from a good friend of mine, Gary, who's got as much of a passion as I do. Game. We just sit around and talk. It's very freeform, organic. We'll have like a topic and then we'll just start going. We'd love to have you join us and join the conversation. So that's on my YouTube and Rumble as well.
The link to the current playlist for The Second Watch is available in the description. So if you guys want to take a look, and I would encourage you do, that's actually where this conversation kind of grew out of, because I was listening to an episode of The Second Watch. I think it was 3 weeks ago. It might have been 4 at this point. YouTube keeps time oddly. It could be 4 weeks ago, and it won't tell you it's 4 weeks until it crosses that actual threshold to the minute.
Right.
But it was about 4 weeks ago that I was listening to the Second Watch podcast, and you had brought up Saul Kripke and baptism and the what is it? I can never remember. Causal theory of intent, right? And so it's this. I'm going to let you explain because I think you're far better at, because I've only flirted with the material. I haven't actually read it, and I'm sure that you are much more well read than I am. So so let's just start there. Who is Saul Kripke? What is the causal baptism or whatever it's called?
Yeah, so Saul Kripke is a philosopher of language from the middle 20th century. People who studied under him said he was like this wacky genius. He once got stuck in his sweater because it was hot. He was trying to take it off in the middle of a lecture. He got stuck and just kept lecturing for like 20, 30 minutes, apparently. But the idea of like philosophy of language evolved from the early 20th century, these guys called the logical positivists. And they were saying that basically what's real is what's in front of you, and our language connects us to that world, and it sort of evolved from there. The positivists were eventually sort of debunked because they couldn't point to certain things like numbers, so therefore numbers didn't exist, which makes no sense because we know numbers exist, numerosity exists. But out of that came like this tradition of the philosophy of language, and what is that? And so when we utter a word like tree, that tree, the word itself has two parts. It's got the referent and a designator. The designator is the word itself, and it has a bunch of meaning attached to it. But then there's the object of reality, and that's the referent. And there's a lot of ink spilled about what all that stuff means. Truth be told, when I was studying philosophy in undergrad, I was not a fan of the analytic philosophers. I was more of an existentialist. I still feel this way. I feel like a lot of the analytics uh, miss the forest for the trees. But I took a philosophy of language class with a very good professor who just knew the material backwards and forwards. He was tough on you. It was really hard to get an A in that class, but you grew an appreciation for the process. And one of the guys you study is Saul Kripke, and he had this idea about. He had a book called Naming and Necessity, and it's about how we understand the connection between the designator and the referent. And he called it the baptism theory of naming, and how the utterance itself, the very first time we said tree, it's completely random. There's nothing necessary about those sounds put together, you know. But the moment we pointed to that thing in our reality and said tree, then it becomes necessary. And that's like moving from then on in, that's what it is. That's what we mean by tree, this thing that we're pointing to. And it's called the baptism. And my professor used to say, it's like the baby Jesus, where are I? And that was kind of like the goofy way of sort of remembering what Saul Kripke was getting at. So I am by no means a master of Saul Kripke's philosophy. That's just something that stuck with me. And over the past few years in the gaming industry, I've noticed a real lot of screaming and yelling on YouTube, Twitter, various social media platforms about what the game is, how to do it, this, that, and the other thing. And you'd have, I noticed a tension between what some of these arguments that sound really, really good, like why you should play a certain way. But then I would note, like, yeah, I agree, but up to a point. And I was trying to figure out like what was that tension. And it actually started with our interview with Griff Morgan of Secrets of Blackmore, who's a historian of what was going on in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked away with this idea that there was just like this almost primordial soup going on with all this experimentation with this new concept, the RPG, and what does it mean to play a role-playing game, a tabletop role-playing game. I mean, it was funny. Like Griff would say things like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Player agency. I'm just playing D&D. But like evolve from the 70s are notions like player agency and like what does that mean for a game and stuff like that. So it got me thinking that it's really an issue of the difference between someone prescribing and saying, this is what I like about D&D, right? This is what I like about RPGs, and this is how I do it. Whereas I'm actually trying to understand what actually happens at the gaming table. And so that's where I kind of adopted Saul Kripke's baptism theory, and I'm applying it to my campaigns. Well, not applying it. It's me identifying what I've been doing with my campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, a better way of saying it. I'm rummaging around all these tools that I have as a game master, whether it's one-to-one time, flex time, Greyhawk as a campaign setting versus Forgotten Realms versus Ravenloft versus some homebrew, various iterations of Dungeons and Dragons or Call of Cthulhu or whatever, various other things that are informing my game, and I'm piecing them together, and then I'm saying, this is my campaign. I'm baptizing my campaign. And that's moving forward. That's what I'm going to be playing. And I think that makes more sense to what's happening. Certainly some combinations of tools are going to be better than others, but to me, that accurately reflects what a game master is doing. They're
And that's
baptizing
it's kind of like a design. There can be a naming component. You can call your campaign by a name, and so there's sort of a naming baptism that takes place there. But what you're talking about is more about designing toward the experience that you want to have at the table. So if the experience that you have wants to include BRP or Lamentations of Flame Princess or whatever it has, as well as maybe some player expectations, GM expectations, all these things kind of wrapped up together, and then this becomes the game. Is that correct? Am I understanding you correctly? It's like a design thing, and it can include a name, but it's more sort of toward the design.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's actually that's a really great way of putting it, because I did give my Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign a name, Lamentations of Elemental Evil,
Hmm.
and that when I say that, I'm referring to a particular thing, and that particular thing had a bunch of design decisions were made, and that's kind of like what the series of short videos I'm going to be making are pointing to. And I started with the baptism one, and so like for example, I wanted one of the first questions I asked myself, what do I want to do? Well, I want to play Lamentations of the Flame Princess, but I was also curious about what would happen if I use a first edition AD&D dungeon, Temple of Elemental Evil, and it just
Hmm.
sort of went from there. Other things I considered that I think game masters need to consider, and I'll talk about this eventually, is who's going to be playing, what kind of players. I mean, before we got on uh, the stream, before we went live, you were talking about how you're like into that 4D RP type game. That's
Hmm.
a question I had for myself. Like, how serious am I going to take the role playing? I opted for more beer pretzels because I knew I was going to be playing with some people I didn't really know all too well online, so I didn't want to
Sure.
put that level of pressure on anybody. But I'll talk about that too in more depth. But all that stuff informed this thing that I'm designing. And by design, again, I'm not talking about like Alexander Macris. I'm like creating a system. No, I'm designing a campaign. And
Right.
then
The
one,
experience. You're designing the experience as opposed to a game system or mechanism or whatever. Though
yeah,
you may also be doing that.
right. Well, that's where you get into stuff like homebrew and stuff like or house rules. Like someone who, like, one of the arguments people like to make about rules as written versus homebrew and all that is that rules as written is like the lingua franca, right? Everybody knows how to play. Once you announce this is a Lamentations game or a BX game or whatever, Beck Me, AD&D 1E, everyone knows what rule set, and if you stick with that, everyone's going to be able to communicate with each other. And I think that's a good argument. However, what about the guy who's been playing AD&D 1E for like 20 years, 30 years, and knows the game inside and out, such that, I don't know, he's discovered one-to-one time will do something interesting with that game, and so starts importing some of these ideas, and knows that certain things are just not going to work well with his particular group, and starts house ruling right out the gate.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think a game master should be precluded from doing that. And that's an example of like that tension that I noticed. I'm like, yeah, rules is written, I get it, but part of being a game master is being creative, right? I mean, it's more than just how you describe goblins. It's also working with the nuts and bolts of a system. So rules is written is great in particular contexts, but sometimes homebrew is just as good, or house rules.
Yeah, and I definitely wanted to bring this up and maybe unpack it a little bit more because this, at least the first time that I had heard you talk about this, you had mentioned it as a sort of way to navigate both sides of this particular argument in the hobby. Is that there are people who are staunchly rules as written, there are people who are staunchly homebrew, and this provides a an opportunity for integration because it's not about rules as written or homebrew. It's about the experience that you're crafting, and you can pull from either side in order to do that. And it's sort of it justifies both without diminishing either. And I find that to be, uh, I think it's useful um, because I don't really think it's a matter of rules as written or homebrew. Um, that's just my take, but I'm not super into all of the like the Twitter debates and whatnot that go on. So, I don't know. I'm yet to be persuaded. I'll say I'm yet to be persuaded to one camp or the other. But because of that, I found this particular statement, these ideas, to be very interesting.
Well, you're touching upon that tension. Like, I mean, and it's almost really, it's actually probably a good thing that you're not familiar with all these debates, right? So for you, going to start dropping all because I studied a lot of philosophy
Go for it.
undergrad, but like the Zen concept of new mind, right?
Mhm.
You haven't been bothered by some of this, so you're just approaching a campaign. I mean, I'm sure you've been gaming for a long time, but like you're approaching a game with like what new mind, like the white belt. Even though you're a black belt, you still have like a white belt's mentality,
Oh,
which
sure, yeah.
which can be a good thing, right? You get like you're seeing things. When I was studying Zen philosophy, they talked about trying to understand things preconceptually, right? So before you start naming tree, rock, this, that, just experiencing it for what it is, right? Whether or not you buy into that, that's I'll leave that up to everyone else. But I do find it somewhat informative to kind of compare it to that. So if I've convinced myself because I like a particular YouTuber or a group of YouTubers or bloggers or whatever, every time I approach a game, I'm going to play it this way. I think you're cutting yourself off from an entire realm of possibilities because at the end of the day, what are we doing when we sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, whatever? We're playing with our imagination, and arguably that's limitless, right? So why would we put rules to it when, as game masters, why would we limit ourselves? That's why I prefer that the metaphor of tools, like one-to-one time versus flex time. Those are just tools. Those are ideas, right? They're not rules for me, but they'll become rules for the game I baptize when I put it together for the campaign. And I think that's where a game master should start. And I guess in a weird sort of way, I'm an advocate for the game master to be the Ubermensch, right? Like you define the values, you define what the campaign's going to be, and then once you put all those tools together, you baptize it, and boom, there it is. This is Lamentations of Elemental Evil. This is my Greyhawk Birthright mashup. This is my fill in the blank, whatever it is. Go and create and be creative and have fun with it because that's awesome in my opinion.
I agree. And I might step that back a little bit in the way that I receive the information and interpret it, because while I do view the GM as the authority or having authority in this situation, I also I tend to apply Arendt's definition of authority, and that being a mutually agreed upon legitimacy. So it's not something that, and you can be the person who really sits down and says, okay, I want to run this system. I want to run it in this setting. I want to use this dungeon from this third system over here, or this, this third, whatever named game. You can do that. And then you can present it to the group and say, hey, this is what I want to run. Is anyone interested? But you still need that assent from the group to say, yes, that sounds like something I'm interested in. Let me play it. So I'd actually back it up to not exclusively rest on the GM. It would be with the group. It's a group decision. I think it's a minor distinction in the context of this conversation. But I just wanted to get that out there because I think that it's interesting in that it sort of speaks to, and I did briefly familiarize myself with Kripke, and he seems to have this idea of like a causal chain, this historical chain of passing vocabulary from the instantiation of tree, and then speaking that forward to someone else who speaks it forward to someone else who speaks it forward to someone else. And I think that takes place within the group, but at a much more rapid pace than Kripke seemed to be communicating, unless I was misunderstanding what I was reading, which is a possibility. And so I find that entire thing just very interesting in how it seems to apply to the hobby at large. I think that it's interesting that it does, like I said previously, or like you said previously, that it sort of straddles a line, right? Regardless of what people think about a middle ground, I think that it's just interesting, right? That it can take from both sides.
Yeah, well, I don't think you're off base too. I'm diving deep into the recesses of my brain here. We talked about in my class, again, I'm more of a existentialist.
Sure.
But Well, this is just as a quick aside. I'm not. A lot of OSR guys think story gaming is like that's like a dirty word.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a dirty word around my table, because I've experienced. There's some phenomenology right here. I experienced fun playing a story game, right? So I think a more interesting question then is, why was that fun? Right. And then exploring that. And then you get, in my opinion, you become a better game master once you start answering those questions. But anyway, going back to what you just said. So there's this concept in like the philosophy of language of reference shift, where like I think the example was people used to think Madagascar was a part of Africa. This is like going back in the 1800s or something. So whenever they saw this one section of Africa, they'd be like, "Oh, that's Madagascar." Well, they were wrong because it's actually like this little island right
Island,
off.
yeah.
Yeah. So eventually, we came to understand that no, that's not Madagascar. This is Madagascar. So there's like this reference shift. That initial baptism, but then the reference shifted to the actual place. But that's based on an increase in knowledge, right? So in terms of the hobby, and tying it to something that Griff had said to us, they didn't know what player agency was. They were just kind of doing it, right? But as we've learned about this hobby, the concept of player agency actually is crystallized, and we kind of know what that is now, though there is some ink spilled over arguments on that as well, right? But that kind of does happen, and this again, I sort of feel like it's a good analogy to use Saul Kripke here to understand what's going on. And in the context of your campaigns that you're running, that can certainly happen, especially when you start running into some issues that you might have. Like, and I want to talk about this on my channel in my video series. I'm going to talk about some mistakes I made and how we resolved them, because I had players who never played Lamentations before. And there was like this death spiral that was forming because it's a pretty brutal game, right? So at that point, I shifted from strict rules as written to start importing some house rules to kind of ease the burden, make things slightly easier. So they felt like they had a little bit more control over death, so to speak. But I'm with you though on sort of the collaborative side of it. I'm not. I don't want to. I say Uber mentioned, but I mean that more as an analogy, not a strict one-to-one identity
Oh, no, I
relationship.
get what you're saying, and I, generally speaking, like, even if I disagree with something that you're saying, like, I've asked you to come on, I've asked you to express your ideas. I'm happy to just give you the floor and let you express your ideas. You don't have to really like justify anything to me anyway. I'm not going to sit
Oh,
here, like, I didn't bring you on to argue with you, right? I brought you
oh
on to
no,
hear what your side of the story is.
oh no, I don't mean to. I hope you didn't. That's not my intention. I'm
No,
actually
no,
just
I didn't get that at all. I'm just putting it out
responding and kind of getting into this conversation
there.
with you about it, because I do agree with you. And I would argue that one of the things that any game master needs to do when they're sitting down to prep a campaign is to ask the question, who am I going to play with? Who is my audience? I think for a lot of us, that question's already answered because you have your friend group and that's who you play with like 95 to 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think a lot of people on YouTube seem to forget. They're like arguing from these like ivory tower positions. But I always consider who my audience is, and audience is a bad word. I should say player group. My in-person gaming crew has a very different personality than to the guys I play with in Lamentations of Elemental Evil versus some of the other guys I've played with on my Discord server, and I think that's a question that a game master needs to answer and understand the answer, because that'll inform some of the other choices. Because at the end of the day, we want a successful campaign. We want people to walk away feeling satisfied, they had fun, they had this really cool experience. And if I would argue it, I'm not there's no wrong way to play guy. I just don't think there's just one way, but there is definitely wrong ways to do things. And I think if you ignore your players, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah,
So,
well, I mean, even here, that's the wrong comment. Where to go? Here we go. My ear trumpet has been struck by lightning. Says the DM's too overbearing. The players will check out. Generally speaking, I agree with that. I also think there's dangers of players themselves being too overbearing and having other players check out if they're over talkative. And there are videos that I have on the channel that really discuss player autonomy, GM authority, and character agency. And there's also a stratification of agency that runs through those 3 roles as well. Generally speaking, I think the vast majority of people in the hobby misuse the term agency, but also like plot and narrative and story. And I could get into all of it, but we don't have that much time. So like, yes, we agree. We seem to agree on this point where it is a matter of, quantifying the group before you sort of put any sort of experience forward so that you can get the feedback and you can work with each other. And then you measure the experience according to, or rather you measure success by how close you got to achieving the experience that you initially set out, which is this baptism piece, or at least a part of the baptism piece. So I agree with you on that. So I can go to chat. We can pick up.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Do what you got to do.
So Patrick Mullen, thank you for joining. Says, I think the key to veering from rules is as written is being intentional with what you're doing. Have a purpose. That's the DIY at the heart of the hobby. I tend to agree, but who cares what I have to say? You're the guest, so.
Oh, I agree 100%. Actually, I'm a lot of when I first jumped into the OSR, it was one of the things I love about the OSR is how friggin' creative it is. And is the OSR dying? I'll leave that to somebody else to talk about. But I think what guys like Pundit has done, what Venture Satanis has done, I think the basic experts, Makwahiedel is just a brilliant take on original D&D, OD&D.
I agree. I actually recently bought both the soft cover and the hard cover just because I wanted them both.
Yeah.
Just reading through it even just reading through it is providing perspective on design and even the culture at hand. Like, obviously there's going to be perspective on the culture at hand, but like he gets it. He really, really gets it. And he really communicates that he gets it really well. So it's like, even if you don't plan on playing the game, I highly recommend buying a copy and just reading through. It's just an excellent read.
Yeah. And
apologies for the interruption.
Oh, no, that's good. Because I agree with you. I think, and one of some of the rules as written proponents, like the hardliners, I got into argument with them a couple years ago on Twitter, and I eventually backed them into a corner. I'm like, well, Makwahiedel shouldn't have been written then. Because I mean, if we're not going to do it yourself, if we're not going to homebrew, none of this stuff we'd be playing AD&D 1E or the first 3 books. But that, again, doesn't sit well with me because of the creative atmosphere that the hobby was born from. It. That's why I like calling it a primordial soup. Something was given birth and then it just multiplied and evolved into all these different games, all these different mechanics, all these different genres. And it's just awesome. So this is where I think rules is written is better understood as a tool and not as a prescriptive sort of ethic and on how to approach a game. What are you trying to, and that's why I asked in my very first video with the baptism, it's like, Game Master, what is it that you want to do?
Yeah, what is the experience that you want to provide at the table? Is it something that's super mathematical and crunchy and a simulation like Harn? Is it something that's more social like Vampire? Is it something that's more traditional like D&D, or is it something that's hard as nails? Like, what's the experience that you want to provide at the table? There is going to be a system out there that gets you as close as you can get to that. And then from there, and as another comment, Chubby Funster says, and thank you for watching. As someone who writes rules, I assume they're just there to create the starting point from which GMs will adapt and change to their goals. I think that's a very reasonable take. Chubby Funster does a lot of Shadow Dark publication. There's Shadow Sun and what is it? The Player's Handbook, something along those lines. It's like,
yeah, he's got
God, is that an incredible resource?
He's got Player's Handbook. He just published a couple months ago, the Game Master's resource. He's got a couple setting books. Yeah, I discovered him about a year ago, and I'm very interested in everything that he's been doing. And we're going to get
Yeah,
him on the second watch eventually.
yeah, yes, and he's like, his materials are excellent. So if you're running Shadow Dark, I would run to Drive Through and grab those as well. Then I have down here, just voicing an agreement. He agrees with you. It's about bringing your theme to life through expression. Let's see what else we have down here. I've unfortunately sort of stopped reviewing chat, so it's going to be a little slow going. Let's see. People having conversations with each other. I hear Chubby Funster says the OSR is dead. Long live the OSR. So here's Patrick. My problem with the OSR is just simply that it's become a marketing term, and the definition of what it is has expanded so far that I don't know what it means anymore.
I think that's fair.
And then I do think that's a follow-up. I certainly don't think it's referring to skill-based games that lean into non-fantasy settings, but it's become a marketing term now for everybody to just add a hashtag to whatever they made and call it OSR. I personally think that there is definitely, at this point in time, April 21, 2025, a huge marketing component to calling something OSR. And I'll even go so far as to say the term like rules light. There are people out there publishing 500-page rule books and calling them rules light.
Yeah.
There's
yeah.
I think it's even Critical Role, like I think the Daggerheart book, right? When they first put out the PDF, it says in the PDF that it's a rules light approach, but it's hundreds and hundreds of pages. So it is absolutely a marketing component, I think. But that doesn't mean that it's a worthless term, right? And if the game that you intend is to evoke the OSR, be it the creativity, be it the old Beckme stuff or basic, like whatever you want to baptize into your game, I think that calling the game OSR, I think that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, and yeah, I think too. I mean, what's funny is just recently I started listening to like Tenkar's Tavern a little bit more often than I used to, and he's got a collection of guys that are truly OSR. These guys have been around for a while, and listening to them talk and the stuff that they've been working on has been kind of eye-opening. I'm not going to try to define it. Again, ink has been spilled over this. Is it old school Renaissance? Is it old school revival? What is it? Is it old school rules? Like, what is it? I think at one point it really was just, hey, we can't get early editions of the game, so we're just going to publish those under the OGL with a different name, right? But then it evolved, right? That you have that reference shift starts to happen, and it goes from like this one thing to this new thing, and I think that was a good thing. And it started with Lamentations of the Flame Princess, I believe, in like 2008. I'm by no means a historian on this, but if you look at Lamentations, there's not a whole lot of new stuff in it, but the stuff that he did do was radical for the time. And moving forward, I know the basic expert will probably wince when I say this, but Maquahito to me is OSR. It's third generation OSR. It's taking some old school rules and doing something new with it setting wise. And that's actually what I'd like to see more of from the OSR, because we do not need any more retro clones. What we need is interesting takes on setting material, tone, genre, that sort of thing, because I think there is a market for that. Not all game masters are interested in doing homebrew, or at least putting the work into it. So if they could go to, if they have the idea, I want to do Aztecs, they can go and pick up Maquahito and the work is done for them, So I'd like to see more of that. So I do think the OSR is alive and well. It's just, I think it's currently searching for an identity, because I think Shadow Dark kind of took everyone by surprise, myself included, and it's got old school. Like, to me, I want to say Shadow Dark is OSR, but it kind of isn't, and it's got that BX feel. That's why I like it, but it's 5e enough that it some of my buddies that I play with who are just do not like OSR material, they'll play Shadow Dark because it's like 5e. So
Yeah, it's 5e light, kind of, right? Not, and that's not a criticism. I'm not criticizing. I think that Kelsey is fantastic. I think that, I mean, every time I've seen her take an interview or even just comment on a video, super gracious, super gregarious, really like the attitude, really like the product. But it definitely feels like it's 5e light. She brought a perspective to a rule set and then made the two sort of merge very successfully.
yep. Yep. And that would not have happened if she had bought into this. I'm going to try not to be too controversial here, but I do think rules as written as a prescription is a con. Like all you're doing is limiting yourself. And if she had done that, like, oh, I like 5e, rules as written, we would never have a Shadow Dark. She never would have brought some of these ideas to the fore. So again, rules as written can have its place, and there's plenty of arguments. All you got to do is look for them on the internet. But it's not the only thing. And I'm picking on rules as written. There's a lot of things people talk about that they have their place. But at the end of the day, and I love the word you keep bringing up, experience. Like, what experience are we bringing to the table? What is it that we want to do? And if these particular tools will help you do it, then go do it. And you know what? If it didn't work, it didn't work. Think about why it didn't work, and then you'll just become a better game master. And then the next campaign that you create is going to be that much better. So,
yeah, I agree. I want to do some real quick housekeeping here. Hello, BGD. I apologize I missed this initially. I'm glad you're here. Thank you. And then there's also the Ultra American TTRPGer. Hello. Thank you for attending. And then Patrick Mullen agrees. He says, I think it needs more variety. It's in its setting possibilities than generic fantasy D&D derivative. Makwahitul is a great example, and it can expand its wings. And this is about Shadow Dark. So this comment came in when we were discussing Shadow Dark. It can expand its wings beyond its focus on dungeoneering, which I think is made apparent with the Black Lodge, Shucked Oyster, and like, so there are ways to, and I think, Shelby Funster certainly contributes to this with his settings and whatnot. It's a very homebrew friendly system.
yes.
It's very homebrew friendly.
Yes.
It's like, you take a look at the book, how it's laid out. All classes have a brief description, what weapons they can use, what armor they can use, their hit points, and then it's usually up to around 3 staple abilities for the class, and then you have their talents that you roll every time that you level up. That's it. How incredibly simple to just be able to create your own classes. You can just create your own classes and away you go.
Yeah. I encourage game masters, especially the younger ones, right? If you have a homebrew setting in mind, Shadow Dark would be perfect for you to experiment with that, because you could sit there and be like, oh, I want to create, I don't know, dragon riders of the north, and then they're good at talking to dragons or something, right? And they're good with lances or whatever, right? Perfect system for it. It's one of the reasons why I like this is the reason why I like Shadow Dark so much, is that it feels so much like old school BX. I can do whatever I want with it. And again, like, yeah, we could do rules as written. In fact, I'm running a rules as written game with it off and on. It's because like my son's involved and my buddy's kids are involved. So whenever we feel like playing, but I basically take and keep on the Borderlands and using Shadow Dark with it. It's been fun, and we're just sticking rules as written to kind of like so the kids learn. But like if I were going to do something big with it, I totally could. I'm waiting for the Western Reaches Kickstarter PDFs to come out so I can see what she does with overland travel and stuff.
Yeah, I'm waiting for those too.
If I don't have to figure it out and she's done it for me, fantastic.
Sure. Just to be clear, Patrick was talking about the entire OSR, not just Shadow Dark. I kind of took it for Shadow Dark and ran with it. But that sort of does go to show that it can be included in that whole OSR umbrella, or under the umbrella, which, especially if we're talking about the baptism of your game, calling your game what it is, defining it by the systems you use, the experience that you want to have at the table, the different dungeons you're going to explore, different player and character behaviors that are to be expected or, trashed. The OSR seems to provide for you the most room by which to craft your very specific campaign that you will baptize. And to sort of return to that idea a little bit, there is a group that wants to say, I'm not saying whether or not this is correct. I'm just saying there's a group out there. Okay. I'm not getting in the middle of anything. But there is a group out there that will say that if you change the rules too much, you're not playing that same game anymore, right? Like if you crumple up and discard a major system that it's just not working for your table, then you're not playing that game anymore. But the fact of the matter is that you weren't really ever playing that game, at least under your idea of baptism. You were playing this named experience. So you're never really playing that game. Right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So that argument is meant to be a counter, right? It's like, oh, you homebrew, dude, are you even playing AD&D anymore? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm playing my game. To me, that's not a defect. It's a feature. It's not a bug. It's a feature of the system. It's a feature of that do-it-yourself OSR punk rock mentality that I think game masters shouldn't be shy about. And to be fair, if you're brand spanking new game master, and you picked up the book for the very first time, you probably shouldn't be doing too much homebrew. Learn the rules, right? So when you start doing that,
yes, I am very much learn the rules first so that you know how to effectively break them kind of a person. Like if you're going to be writing a book, you want to learn the rules of the hero's journey. You want to learn the rules of limping an eye patch. You want to learn these rules so that you know how to effectively break them so that when you do break them, it is effective. I completely agree with you on that. If you're brand new, learn the rules.
Yeah.
But outside of that,
Yeah. Once you get your feet wet, get your bearings, by all means, come up with something cool that you think that'll work out your game. And if it doesn't work, figure out why it didn't work. And then, like I said, your next campaign is going to be even better. But yeah, yes, you're right. I'm not playing that game anymore. And if I announced I was playing rules as written AD&D 1E game, and then I started changing right out of the gate, by all means, be mad at me, because what I'm presenting to you is not what I baptized.
Yes.
Right. But
there's that. You also look, when you baptize something, you can't just change it in the middle for no reason whatsoever. Don't tell me that we're playing a 3.5 game and then all of a sudden throw in some spells that only showed up in 4E or a system that only showed up. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's
I don't want to name names or anything like that, but a little while ago, I was going to join an online game. It sounded really cool. I was really excited about it. And then I started seeing, it just seemed like every other day a new system was being tacked on. And I was like, maybe you shouldn't have started inviting people to your game, because it doesn't sound like you even know what you want to do. That was the thought I had. I didn't, I was gracious. I was just kind of like, well, let's see what happens. The game ended up not happening, but not surprising in my opinion, because no one knew what was happening. If you want to put together your campaign document, we're going to play this rule system, but I'm making these changes for this game because this is what I want to do. By all means, do it, but make sure it's done before you release it, because you got to have that baptism before the campaign can start.
Yep, there's no surefire way to just ruin the liminal space at the table and the shared imagined space of going and role playing than by just completely confusing everyone out of the gate and forcing them to go and read a book because they don't know what the rules are and this is the system that you've decided to implement, but you didn't tell them beforehand, and so they have no idea how to actually, you don't know if anyone sitting around the table has used the system before.
Right.
So, and you need to account for that. You need to account for that. You can't just spring that on people.
Yeah.
And so I think that even in that regard, right, the baptism as a sort of essential step in the process. Now, it can probably be considered to happen by default, but there has to be a definitive end to it where you say, okay, this is what the game is. This is what the experience is tailored to, or rather, this experience is what the game is tailored to. There's not going to be any other changes. And
well,
because
yes.
you're just going to end up confusing people, and it's not a true baptism if it continues to change and evolve over time.
Right. Yeah. Well, there is something to be said about knowing when to stop. Right. I think I used in my rambling of my first video on this, like the saucier, right? Throwing all kinds of ingredients in the saute pan. There comes a point where you need to, okay, you're starting to overwork this thing, you know, but that comes with experience, you know. So, but yeah, I agree. Like you got to, you know, you have to, just know when to stop. I think it was, of all people, freaking Ben Affleck at some panel discussion on AI. They asked him about like what's going to do to the film industry, and he's like, "Well, yeah, people are sweating, but at AI is just nothing but a craftsman. Craftsmen can do, you know, they know all the tricks, but artists know when to stop." So I thought that was an interesting, Ben Affleck of all people said that, and I was like, wow, that's really profound. And I think that can kind of apply in what we're just talking about here. You're like, at some point, a good game master is going to know when to stop. You're like, okay, this is going to be what it's going to be. Now, that being said, and I do think you got to listen to your players. If something's not working and you want that campaign to keep going, you know, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you know, we've been doing this for a little while. This doesn't seem to be working. Let's start house ruling this.
I completely agree, but it can't be a unilateral, just, you know, upending something or adding a system. It can't be, you know, GM unilateral fiat, because that just won't work.
Yeah, I'm kind of a weirdo in that regard too. Like I care about what my players think. I've been told I'm a little weird for being like, hey, is everyone cool with everything? Oh, all right.
I would not think that's too weird.
Tough. It's too tough. All right, well, we'll institute these rules to make it a little less tough. But
yeah,
you know,
I would not think that's weird. Oh, Jason, thanks for stopping in. Please do feel free to watch later. I appreciate it. Thank you. Patrick Mullen says, really interesting conversation. I appreciate that. Thank you. And then OSR isn't really my jam because I don't veer into fantasy or class and level games anymore. Totally get that. I prefer skill-based systems myself. I do think that there is value in a class and a level system, depending on what experience you want, right? Like do you want to be and D&D is a great example. Do you want to be a fantasy superhero? Class systems and level systems are great for that. Hit point systems are good for that too. I hate hit points, but like if you want to be a superhero or a vampire or something where really only the last hit point matters, right, then it's a really good system to sort of get that, because vampires are very powerful and they're super hard to take down. Same thing with superheroes, be it fantasy or otherwise. So I think hit points really work well in those systems. But I get not really wanting to do class and level games anymore. I do like fantasy though. And then the Ultra American TTRPGer says he backed Western Reaches for the main physical books, no zines. I'll get there. I'm going too fast. I'll get there. Might get the zines at a later time or just print them off myself. That makes sense. I mean, everyone and their brother backed Western Reaches, I think, right?
Oh yeah, that was. I mean, yeah, that was kind of groundbreaking. A buddy of mine was mentioning he's DM Cloaker from the second watch. He was mentioning like usually someone who does a Kickstarter, they hit here, then their next Kickstarter, then their next Kickstarter. With Kelsey, it was the opposite. So we're in the middle of a huge shift in the hobby, and I'm excited for it. And that's why I'm telling people, don't be afraid to homebrew. Don't be afraid to put your creative brains at work and see what comes out, because who knows? I just see big things on the horizon for the hobby, even with Wizards of the Coast, you know, floundering as it is. So
yeah, and you know what? To that, I think that there is a major difference between the health of the hobby and the health of the industry. There is certainly some interdependence, but I don't think Hasbro floundering with the Dungeons and Dragons property is indicative of the health of the hobby. It's indicative of the health of the industry. And I think that sort of being aware of that will sort of help prevent the doom and gloom perspectives that seem to be emanating from certain sources, which I will not name. But the hobby can be done without spending a dime, right? It's just people getting around, agreeing to rules, and away you go to have your experience. And so I think that that's important. But I also agree with you. I think that we're seeing a sort of a ships passing in the night, right? So one's on the way up, the other's on the way down. I think that that is now made incredibly apparent by the success of the Western Reaches. Yeah. So Patrick, again, if you don't take your players into consideration, you have failed as a game master. I completely agree with this. 100%. Brian, Stochastic Agency, telling you that you've got a new subscriber, and he definitely wants to see upcoming videos that you've mentioned.
Thank you, man.
Great channel. He's got great ideas. The podcast is fantastic, and the whole Saul Kripke element has just been—it's been buzzing through my head ever since I heard you mention it, which is why I reached out to have this conversation. Once I heard that you said you were doing the rounds, that was well. I'll have you on. My channel is teeny tiny, but I'll have you on. I'd love to have the conversation, and I feel like this has been fantastic.
Well, thanks, man. And I think I've mentioned this in a couple video, and at least one video. Game mastery is not a process. It's not a formula. It's a practice, very similar to law. They call it a law practice. You graduate from law school and you know a bunch of stuff, but you really don't know a whole lot. But the more you do it, the better you get. You get this deeper understanding. I think game mastery is the same thing. And what I've noticed in my real life experiences, lawyers talk to each other. It's like, hey, I had this problem and this is how I handled it. And guys like, well, next time try it this way. Game mastery is the same thing. These conversations are way more important than a static video. It's one of the reasons why I've been kind of resistant to do static videos. I'd rather have someone on the second watch to chat with or come here and have a conversation,
I totally get that. And sometimes though, and Brian, Stochastic Agency can attest to this, sometimes having a conversation takes a little bit to get there, right? Like you and I have an hour of your time, so I'm really trying to sort of hit the topic as hard as I can and circle back and make sure that we're like really getting there and nailing it. But there have been conversations that I've had with others who have more time available, and so it rambles and there's conscious as well. So sometimes sort of sitting down and going, okay, here's my video, point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4 helps.
Yeah,
at least it helps me. But I get what you're saying about wanting to have the conversation. I agree with you. I think that having a conversation is so important because it's the perspectives and the ideas that are going to commingle, and there will be new ideas that grow out of that. And so I'm with you on that. And I'm over the moon that you would, lower yourself to my teeny tiny little channel.
I'm small fry too. Don't kid yourself, man. I'm trying to grow my channel and stuff. So I hope people are liking and subscribing this channel, not just mine.
Thank you. And Lordmatteus' channel is linked in the description as well. So please do click on that and go over there and subscribe to him if you haven't already. I thank you, Patrick, for the compliment. Your channel punches far above its weight, and it's excellent to hear from you, Mattias. So I agree. It's excellent to hear from him, and I thank you for the compliment. And then it looks like the Ultra American TTRPGer says, IGM under 2 main rules. Rule 0, GM is the final arbiter of all rulings, and Rule 1, the table is allowed to change what they like for their own benefit. I don't see anything immediately, red flaggy about that. So to borrow a term.
Yeah, if you're having like this honest conversation about how the campaign works. I mean, even the like the 4D guys, Max, Boyvon, like they'll have conversations after their game sessions.
Which I find fantastic. I have limited experience playing with them, but every single time I've played with them, there is always a conversation that happens after the game, and we talk about what was done wrong, what could have been done better, how we could have changed things. Was this good enough? Like, all those sorts of things. You explain your perspective. Sometimes it was just a matter of, why'd you guys leave that monster? Why didn't you gut the monster and take the egg sac? That was the treasure. That was worth a lot of money. Well, it was in a dungeon with a lot of zombies, and it was spewing black ichor. So this is a real conversation that we had. It was spewing black ichor, so I just thought it was a zombie, and I didn't think anything of it when we killed it. You know what I mean? So it's a very constructive way to handle, because it's instantiated, because it's every single session. What did we do wrong this time? Let's talk about what we did wrong this time, and let's improve for next time. And then that makes the game iterative. You instantiate what you did wrong, and then you work on improving, and you change it for the next session. I absolutely love playing that way. I think that it's fantastic. And I have a lot of respect and a lot of aspiration toward that style, that particular style. But I will say this: it can be exhausting. It can be exhausting. It is.
I've never tried it, but now that I've learned a little bit about it, and here's the thing: I've been doing this for 35 years. I learned something new listening to Max Boivin, right? So I'm curious. Like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if this is in my wheelhouse, but I'm willing to try it. I'm willing to pull that tool, brand spanking new tool, and pop it into a campaign to see if it works. I'll probably pick a short campaign, so I'm not, just to kind of hey, we're going to play like maybe 5 sessions of this or whatever it is, right? And just sort of see what happens. But I'll learn something, and if things didn't work out, I can talk to him like, hey, where did I go wrong or whatever? You know what I mean?
So. Yeah, yes. And I find, and Patrick Mullen does something similar. He tries to do minor feedback at the very least with the players after every session. And then for campaigns that are very successful and have been moving for some time, always does an annual deep feedback, which I think is excellent.
A good idea.
Yeah. But like to speak a little bit more on 4D, that particular style of role-playing being exhausting, I don't say that's not a negative, right? Like in the moment, it is just, it's something that will spend your mental energy. It will spend your mental energy. But afterwards, it's like, okay, the game ended. We had one session. In my experience, that's about how long I want a 4D game to go for, is about one session. We have the session. That's it. That's probably because I'm not as well practiced as Max and Crispy and Phil and Rick. Like I'm just not as well practiced as they are. But I do find that as soon as as soon as it ends, I kind of want more. It's like, oh, well, when's the next one? Or when are we going to do this again? So it is a very positive thing for me to say that it's exhausting, because it occupies a great deal of mental energy, but it's just, it is a very satisfying way to play. It's very, very satisfying. Well, and that's not even what you came here to talk about. So what the hell am I doing? Totally.
Well, no, it's totally cool. It's totally cool, man. These things are organic. I like that. So, technically, we should probably wrap this up in a few minutes.
Yeah, no, let's wrap it up. I had an hour of your time. I'm good to get going. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for having this conversation. I absolutely loved it. I would love to have you on again. Gary is more than welcome to come on as well. Like this isn't just extended to you. I'm happy to have everyone on and have those conversations, but you kind of have your own thing with your podcast. But
I know you said you got to work Saturdays, but I've enjoyed this conversation. So if there's ever a Saturday you have off and you feel like staying up late on a Friday, we'd love to have you on.
Oh, absolutely. We can absolutely arrange that.
So I think that would be great.
Arrange that. So I'll just end here. Thank you so much, Lordmatteus. Thank you for everyone who came and participated in the chat. I'm very, very grateful. And, I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone. And it's going to look at my